If you tried to buy RAM this year, you already know something is deeply wrong. Prices have gone vertical. A stick of memory that cost you pocket change 18 months ago now costs more than decent graphics cards, and the people who build PCs for a living are basically pulling their hair out. And here's the thing nobody tells you at the checkout screen. This is not a store problem, it's not a scalper problem, it's a factory problem, and it starts thousands of miles away inside buildings the size of small towns. So today I want to walk you through the two companies that could actually fix this mess because they are betting on completely opposite strategies and one of them might just break the crisis wide open. Stick with me to the end because I'm gonna give you my honest take on who wins, and trust me, it is not the obvious one. And if you are into this kind of deep dive where we follow the money and the machines instead of just yelling about prices, hit subscribe right now so you don't miss the next one. Alright? Let me show you how we got here. Here's a fact that blew my mind when I first learned it. The DRAM business, the exact thing that makes your RAM, is one of the most brutal industries on the planet. It's basically a graveyard. For decades, everybody would see demand rising, rush to build factories at the same time, and then all that supply would flood the market at once, prices would collapse, and whoever had the weakest balance sheet would just die. Boom, then bust, then repeat. And the list of the deceased is way too long. Japan basically owned memory in the 80s, and then names like Toshiba, NEC, Hitachi, and Fujitsu either got crushed, merged, or quietly walked away from DRAM. Europe took a swing too. There was a company called Qimonda, spun out of Infineon in Germany, and it went bankrupt back in 2009. But here's the wild part, and I love this detail. Qimonda had developed something clever called buried word line technology, and even after the company was long gone, that technology did not vanish. The patents lived on, and years later they resurfaced inside a Chinese company we're gonna talk about a lot today. So a dead German firm is quietly powering part of China's memory ambitions right now. After all that carnage, the industry shrank to three survivors: Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. And these three learned the lesson the hard way. They got cautious, almost paranoid about building too much, and for a while that discipline kept everyone profitable and everyone stable. Then AI showed up and it set the whole plan on fire basically. Now, to understand the shortage, you have to understand what these AI chips crave, and the answer is a special kind of memory called HBM, high bandwidth memory. This is not the RAM in your laptop. It is exotic, it is stacked, and AI accelerators are starving for it. NVIDIA's Ampere generator, the A100 chip that kicked off the early AI boom, shipped with around 40 gigabytes of memory. Fast forward to the brand new Rubin generation, and each GPU carries 288 gigabytes of HBM4, stacked across 8 towers of silicon, pushing 22 terabytes per second of bandwidth. That is a monstrous jump in just a few years. Now, multiply that. A single AI cluster does not use just one chip. It uses tens of thousands, sometimes even millions of these chips, and everyone wants a giant pile of this memory. The demand is not a trickle, it's a flood. And here's the cruel twist that makes the shortage so sticky. HBM is painfully hard to make. You're stacking 12 to 16 ultra-thin slices of silicon on top of each other, drilling microscopic channels through them called through-silicon vias, thinning the wafers until they're fragile as paper, and then bonding the tower together with heat and pressure where a tiny crack or one bad layer ruins the whole stack. Yields suffer badly, and the packaging tools alone can cost hundreds of millions of dollars each. And this is the part that I really want to hammer home. Making memory is not a design problem you solve with a smart engineer and a whiteboard. It's a long, grinding, process learning marathon with years of tweaking, failing, and slowly climbing your yields up point by point. And that is exactly why our two main characters are playing such a different game. Now, let's start with the current champion, which is SK Hynix out of South Korea. These guys are the king of advanced HBM right now, plain and simple. They were first to commercialize the cutting-edge stuff, they became NVIDIA's main HBM supplier, and by most estimates, they hold well over half the entire HBM market. So when the AI boom hit, they did not hesitate. they went all in. The centerpiece is a new facility called M15X in Chengdu, and honestly, the scale is hard to wrap your head around. This thing is city scale. SK Hynix finished construction in October of 2025, started running wafers through it in early 2026, and it is dedicated almost entirely to the most advanced, highest performance HBM they can build, the memory that pairs with NVIDIA Rubin's accelerators. They were so desperate to feed demand, they pulled the timeline forward by months. On top of that, they're pouring money into advanced packaging, including a big plant in Indiana. And they're not stopping there. An even bigger complex is coming at Yongin, planned to eventually hit over 800,000 wafer starts a month, one of the largest memory hubs on Earth. Their capital spending for 2026 ballooned to around 48 to 50 trillion Korean won, and the chairman of the group has flat out said he expects the memory shortage to run all the way through 2030. So the SK Hynix bet is crystal clear. Do not chase volume, chase the crown. Build the best, most advanced memory in the world and lock in the biggest AI customers on the planet. Now, flip to the challenger, and this is where it gets really interesting. CXMT, or Changjian Memory Technologies, based in Hefei, China. These guys are the newcomers, only founded in 2016. They inherited some of the old Qimonda technology through patents, developed a bunch of their own, and until recently, the big three barely mentioned them. Now, CXMT is doing the exact opposite of SK Hynix. Instead of chasing the bleeding edge, they're scaling conventional DRAM as hard as humanly possible. The regular stuff, DDR5 and LPDDR, the memory that goes into your phone, laptop, desktop, and servers, and here's the real reason for that. China is restricted from buying the most advanced chip-making tools, specifically the EUV machines you need for the very latest nodes. So, CXMT made a smart call. They use the older DUV tools they can actually get and run enormous volumes of mature, proven process to build up experience, push yields higher, and drive costs down. They run several big fabs across Hefei and Beijing, and they are building more in Shanghai, and their output is climbing towards Micron's level. Analysts expect them to hit roughly 350,000 wafers a month by the end of 2026, right on Micron's heels, and further expansion could more than double that past 600,000. They're adding capacity faster than anyone else in the industry right now. They're also quietly developing HBM, though most of their capacity stays in commodity memory because that is where they make money. Their DRAM revenue grew over 700% year on year at one point. That is not a typo. SK Hynix keeps committing tens of billions, including a fresh $15 billion chunk for expanding advanced memory. But CXMT pulled off something that genuinely turns heads. In July of 2026, they went public on Shanghai's stock market and raised about $8.6 billion, the biggest listing in all of Asia this year. And when the stock started trading, it exploded, closing up around 466% on its first day, which briefly made CXMT the most valuable company listed in China. A startup nobody knew a few years ago now has a war chest to build even more factories. And what I find fascinating is that the whole AI arms race has quietly turned into a contest of who can pour more concrete, install more machines, and grind their yields up the fastest. The glamorous part is the AI models, but the real choke point is memory factory construction and process know-how. Whoever controls the memory controls the pace of the entire AI build-out. So, who actually ends the crisis? Alright, here's my honest opinion. I think both bets are smart, but they solve different problems, and that is exactly why together they could crack this thing open. SK Hynix ending the HBM shortage matters for the giant AI data centers, but let me be real, the premium HBM is not what is jacking up the price of the RAM in your gaming rig. What actually hits your wallet is the conventional DDR5 and LPDDR, and that is precisely the flood CXMT is preparing to unleash. So, if you just want memory prices to come back down to earth, the Chinese scale play might be one that eventually helps you out the most, and I did not expect to land there when I started digging. And by the way, I am genuinely optimistic about it. More factories, more wafers, more competition, that is how you break a shortage. For years, the big three kept supply tight and prices comfy, and a hungry newcomer willing to build like crazy is exactly the disruption this cozy little club needed. When all that new capacity comes online, much of it in 2027 and beyond, we should see the shortage ease and the prices soften. That is a good thing for anyone who buys a phone, a laptop, or builds their own PC. But this industry has killed company after company through overbuilding. When everyone scales at the same moment, all that supply hits at once, prices crash past the point of relief, and value gets destroyed. The very thing that saves us as consumers a glut of cheap memory is what has historically buried the manufacturers. So there is a real chance we swing from a painful shortage straight into a brutal oversupply. And honestly, cheaper RAM sounds like a great problem to have. So that is the real story behind the RAM crisis. It was never about a store running out of stock. It's about two very different companies, one chasing the premium crown with city-sized HBM memories, and the other flooding the world with conventional memory at a scale nobody saw coming. Both racing to outbuild a shortage that AI created almost overnight. My bet is that the combination of the two is what finally ends it, and we come out to the other side with more choice and lower prices that the old three-player club ever wanted to give us. That is a win in my book. And if this helped you understand what is going out behind those insane price tags, smash that like button because it genuinely helps the channel more than you think, and subscribe if you want more breakdowns exactly like this one, because this memory war is far from over, and I'll be covering every twist of it. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll catch you in the next one.